Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have another fog warning issued for tomorrow morning, as we're going to see some more thick fog throughout tonight into tomorrow, and potentially even some freezing fog with those temperatures in the south and the east under the inversion dropping well below freezing once again. We'll then have a look at the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature. So it is remaining quite cold in the south and the east under the higher pressure. Further northwards and westwards, slightly milder air masses pushing in, so it will be a little bit warmer than the south and the east for most areas in the north and the west. A bit of a reversal of what we have had recently. Towards the end of this coming working week, it does look likely, though, a cold air mass will spread through for all from the north, giving precipitation quite widely, at least for a time, and then it will bring us all back down to average or below average. So the south and east will remain cold. The further northwards and westwards you are, it will turn colder as well. We'll then check out the longer range, look at the GFS, GM, ECMWF, and the ensembles, as it does look likely this pattern of high pressure over the top of us with northerly winds looks quite likely. But it is a sort of a brief northerly wind with the origins coming from the North Atlantic, riding round the higher pressure, as we'll see on the pressure charts in the second half of the video. So yes, the wind direction is technically coming from a northerly direction, but it's not particularly cold. Briefly colder air masses like the end of this working week could come through, but it is generally going to be sort of flip-flopping around average or maybe slightly below at times. The longer range, the GFS is suggesting today really stormy conditions, and even suggested it yesterday to do YouTube short for that, where the tropospheric polar vortex gets absolutely dumped out in the North Atlantic, giving us very stormy low pressure conditions. But actually, with the strength of those winds actually tracking quite cold air all the way across the Atlantic. Really quite bizarre charts, but perhaps the GFS is catching on to something, maybe really stormy to the start of February, which we didn't expect a few days ago, but it's starting to catch a little bit in the GFS, but we aren't seeing it at all really in the GM and ECMWF out to day 10, and the ensemble members are not too keen on it either, so we'll have to see what that is showing in the second half of the video. So, do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So, if we do start on the live radar, you can see there is a big dividing line at the moment in the air temperatures. It's difficult to see on the precipitation chart here, but where you can see these greener colours, that's where we've got some light, patchy rain and sort of a decaying weather front under the higher pressure, getting sort of squeezed out, seeing a bit of precipitation here, maybe some wintriness over higher ground of northern England, but most areas is pretty dry, but this is just really giving thick cloud in places. But to the west of this sort of decaying weather front, we do have quite mild conditions, temperatures around sort of 9 or 10 degrees today. Further southwards and eastwards, we've still got lingering fog in places, and temperatures are really cold today, around 2 or 3 degrees for a lot of areas here, and we'll be able to see it in a minute on those temperature charts. But yeah, it is really quite cold. It's because we've got big high pressure over the top of us. On the eastern side of the high pressure, it's still dragging in a bit of an easterly flow of the near constant, where that cold air still is, at least towards the surface, and we're not seeing a lot of mixing of air under that higher pressure as well, with quite stagnant patterns with this brief sort of easterly flow in places. And it basically means the surface conditions where we've got cold air remaining from the cold spell last week, it doesn't move. We just keep that cold air building at the surface. Where further westwards, we've got more of a southwesterly flow and stronger winds and more mixing of air. It drags those milder upper air temperatures down towards the surface, and that's why it is warmer in the north and the west. Now, if you put on those temperatures around 11 AM as I'm recording this, you can see the big temperature contrast at the moment. Through northern Scotland, where only a few days ago we had an amber snow warning issued, temperatures around 9 or 10 degrees. Really only cold in Scotland over the higher ground, most low-lying areas at towards that sort of 8 to 10 degree range, and that's the same for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and for parts of northwest England in places, right along the coast perhaps, and into parts of West Wales and southwest England. But really anywhere eastwards of that, it is cold, and you can see where we've got these lighter blues in around the London area, down towards central southern England, East Anglia, into the parts of the Midlands and northern England. Temperatures are still hovering around freezing at 11 AM because it is just keeping that layer of very cold air at the surface. Now, this inversion pattern, the upper air temperature is a lot milder than you'd expect with this sort of temperatures at the surface, but that mixing of air will progress eastwards slowly over the coming days. This inversion pattern will probably only linger really in southern and eastern parts over the next few days, but still another quite widely cold day out there for many. Again, luckily we got no precipitation. Only real risk is a bit of frost, ice and fog, so it probably is pretty decent to get out there and wear those areas to escape any of that cloud, especially the further eastwards and southwards you are. It'll be quite a beautiful day out there with some nice pleasant sunshine, and that will continue over the next few days. Now, if you look at the weather warnings, you can see we've got a widespread yellow fog warning for quite a few areas, stretching down to central southern England, through the East Midlands, East Anglia, even stretching towards northeast England. Now, it issued for overnight, tonight into tomorrow. Again, it's officially issued for 12:15 tonight, but really anywhere from tonight into tomorrow morning could be affected. Freezing fog will lead to difficult driving conditions and could cause some travel delays in some areas on Monday. We did see a fog warning issued earlier this morning, but it now has expired, and of course covered that in yesterday's video. High likelihood, lower end of the impact matrix. Again, could be some issues here. Not all areas within this warning will see fog. Some areas outside the warning will see fog, but this is where the highest likelihood you are of seeing disruptive foggy conditions. So make sure you do stay aware of the warnings and do take care out there if you are driving in the morning tomorrow. Now, if you go to the UKV and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the course of the next 5 days, you can see that weather front progressing eastwards, but really just fizzling out under the higher pressure. And you can see for southern and east areas, we have clearer skies. Elsewhere, more cloudy conditions prevailing. Through tonight, that the clearer skies actually return slightly further westwards, and then we see that fog build towards the surface through tomorrow morning. And then again, it's quite a similar day to today, where it's generally quite pleasant in central, southern and eastern areas, and you can see further northwards and westwards, cloudier with a bit more precipitation. You can see for the far east, through East Anglia and South East England, you can see a few showers progressing in and a bit of cloud, and that's because we've got that bit of easterly flow developing. Again, could produce a bit more mixing of air. It could slightly actually give a little bit of a rise to the temperatures there, but make it feel a little bit colder. So the feel like will be colder, but the actual thermometer temperature might be slightly milder by a degree or two, with a bit of a brisker northeasterly wind. Again, nothing ridiculous and not really pulling in any cold air masses, but just coming in off the North Sea will be a little bit nippy there. But pretty much carbon copy today for most other areas. A bit more sunshine further westwards though. And then into Tuesday, again, another pretty pleasant day for central, southern and eastern areas, again, with that inversion taking place. Pretty cold at the surface, further northwards and westwards, milder. And then as we head into Wednesday, you can see that weather front are progressing in from the north, and it does shift southwards to give precipitation for all. So that inversion sort of comes to an end through Wednesday, and actually behind that weather front, we do go into colder, fresher air. So more sunshine for all, some wintry showers, perhaps through Scotland, but we are still generally under higher pressure, so not expecting anything too severe, just a lot of frost and fog probably around, but more widespread, more sort of widespread than just the south and the east. And then as we head into Friday, eventually we just stay under the higher pressure, and you can start to see another air mass starts to topple in from the northwest. Now, if you look at the upper air temperatures, you can see at the moment in the south and east, it is cold in terms of upper air temperatures, but it's not ridiculously cold. It's sort of temperatures, sort of average upper air temperatures for this time of year. And you see those upper air temperatures even fade over the course of the next 24 hours, and you don't see much difference to areas further northwards and westwards at the 850 HPA level, but at the surface it stays bitterly cold. As we head into Tuesday, we can see very little mixing there. You can see for most areas the upper air temperatures around that sort of 2, 3, 4 degree range, but there is such a huge contrast at the surface, as we'll see at the moment. And then eventually, as we head towards later in the week, you can see quite a cold air mass spread in from the north. Nothing ridiculously cold, but average to below average air mass, and it does give widely colder conditions for all. Again, temperatures back down towards the low single digits overnight, frosts as well. But of course, under high pressure, we're not expecting any winteriness with that at all. If you look at the temperatures, you can see this afternoon temperatures in the south and the east hardly getting above sort of 2 to 4 degrees. For areas further westwards, 9 or 10. This will be even starker tomorrow. And you can see through tonight, through central and eastern areas, it's got a -5 or -6. Bitterly cold conditions. You'd expect those sort of overnight lows with sort of a severe cold spell, not through central southern England. This is -6 degrees. You'd expect with a sort of a severe cold spell, not with sort of an inversion pattern with upper air temperatures around freezing. As we head into Monday, you can see those temperatures in the day, hardly again getting above 2 or 4 degrees towards central England and eastern England, but further north and westwards, once again, 10 or 11. As we head into Monday night to Tuesday, that frost is slightly further westwards, where we have a clearer skies there. As I said, for areas further eastwards, we've got a bit more of a easterly flow, northeasterly flow, and it will keep those temperatures slightly above freezing, but it will still feel cold out there. And then into Tuesday afternoon, once again, temperatures hardly above 2 to 4 degrees. And then again into Tuesday night, another widespread frost through that central areas, spreading into southwest England and East Anglia. And then eventually into Wednesday, you can see still cold in the south and east through the afternoon, but we've got a wedge of slightly milder air ahead of the weather front. And it'll progress southwards, giving briefly milder conditions, and then Thursday night, quite a widespread cold night. Not quite as cold as under the inversion, but widely sort of 1 to 5 degrees. And then into Thursday afternoon, widely sort of 5 to 7 degrees. So we're actually under a colder air mass there, but in the south and the east, the temperatures are actually slightly higher. So yeah, that is very interesting seeing that, just showing you the power of an inversion and a higher pressure build. And then eventually into Friday, a widespread frost as that cold air is embedded, and we do see much colder conditions further northwards and westwards. So you can see the next 5 days it's going to remain cold, with quite chilly conditions at pretty much all times in the south and the east, and definitely towards the last few days of this working week in the north and the west. Now, if you do look at the longer range, go over to the GFS and see what that is showing over the course of the next sort of 14 or 15 days. So you can see the high pressure building in at the moment. Under that inversion, cold in the south and east with a slack easterly flow in places. You see that brief northerly wind towards Thursday and Friday. Could be a few wintry showers here, but you can see we're still generally under higher pressure, around 1,020, 1,030 millibars for most areas. So it is still higher pressure. Not going to see too many showers. Eventually the high pressure topples and we stay cold, probably with still cool air masses. We'll probably see again more inversion conditions in places. Again, we'll have to see exactly where the high pressure does end up. And then eventually, as I said, towards next weekend, we do try and pull in a bit of a northerly flow at times, with a bit of a high pressure build further northwards. But here, just pulls a temporarily cold air mass in, and then eventually the GFS just does what it does and pulls in massive westerly winds. Huge area of the tropospheric polar vortex sat through Greenland, northern Canada, and the North Atlantic towards Iceland, giving us really, really unsettled and stormy conditions. You can see the upper air temperatures. Look how cold it is through northern Canada and Greenland. Again, look at the northern hemisphere view. You can see all the cold air is getting drawn to North America, Greenland and Canada. Really, really cold there. Look at the temperature deviation. All this bissy cold air spilling out towards Canada and the United States of America. And again, if we go back to the European look and put on the potential equivalent temperatures, you can see really quite cold air is getting dragged all the way across the Atlantic. So yes, it could go very stormy here, but it could be very snowy for higher ground and could be pretty chilly for all areas here. So we'll have to see what happens. The GFS did show it again in yesterday evening's run, but we're not seeing it too much from the Ensemble members, and we're not seeing it too much from the ECMWF or the GM, or at least hints of that, because of course they only run out to day 10. We're not seeing any signs of massive westerly winds coming in at this stage. We'll have to see how it does develop. If we do go over to the GM, see how that does compare. Again, high pressure building in at the moment, or continuing to take control at the moment. That brief northerly wind later this week, high pressure topples, and towards the weekend we again see it try to reach northwards. Maybe a brief northerly flow there, colder air mass coming down the eastern side of the country, and then at day 10 just still have high pressure over the top of us. Yes, a gently westerly flow to the north of this higher pressure, but for the UK, you can see the upper air temperatures are around average for the time of year, probably chilly under the inversion further southwards and westwards here. And again, nothing too exceptional. And yes, cold air is gathering towards North America, but you can see the northern hemisphere view, the tropospheric polar vortex is still quite split out, and we haven't got all these purple spreading out to northeast Canada and the Atlantic yet. So it could happen, but not really any major signs of it at this stage. Quite a lot of blocking actually over the North Pole here. And, if we got connected to that with this ridge we have over the top of us, then it could go quite cold, with generally cold air spreading out into Eastern Europe at this stage. So yeah, very different from the GM and the GFS today. If we do look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. Again, higher pressure over the top of us at the moment. A brief northerly wind later this week. And then we try and see it ridge further north towards next weekend, but not really as successful as the GM or the GFS. And eventually at day 10, you can see quite a westerly flow, but not hugely stormy, with still higher pressure in control. The upper air temperatures flip-flop between mild and cold, if the northern hemisphere view. The tropospheric polar vortex is very much split across the whole of the North Pole, so no real concentration as of yet through North Canada. Yes, some quite dark purples there, but nothing too exceptional yet. But it could start to develop. So perhaps signs of it going very stormy in the longer term, but nothing concrete in the GM, the ECWF yet. Still keeping us relatively settled up until the 1st of February. The GFS, though, does go very bullish on a very unsettled stormy pattern. If we do finish by looking at the Ensemble members, the latest GFS hasn't fully come out yet, so if we just refresh it, you can see all the way to the 1st of February, we're around average or below average, and again, there's no real point looking at the upper air temperatures the next few days, because as we know, we're under the inversion, so it is colder than these upper air temperatures would suggest. In the longer term, though, generally average or below average conditions and pretty minimal precipitation. If we go back to the midnight run, again, you can see it extended all the way out to the first week of February, still average or below average in general. Nothing too exceptional at all, really. Some cold air masses at times, but again, nothing especially cold. And then, of course, there are some milder members as well. You can see the precipitation does increase towards the first week of February, but not exceptionally so. So again, not suggestive of huge low pressure systems moving in yet. So we'll have to see. If we do look at the ECMWF Ensemble members for London, again, more bullish in terms of slightly above average temperatures at times, but still showing below average and generally probably averaging around out around the 1981-2010 mean. Some much colder runs in the longer term, but also some much milder runs, so just showing there is a lot of uncertainty into the first week of February. And yes, there is increased precipitation at times, but we're not expecting anything too crazy from this. And again, with around 50 Ensemble members here, you'd expect to see a lot more precipitation spike through the first week of February if a lot of the Ensemble members did think that big low pressure pattern in from the west, the tropospheric polar vortex dropping into the North Atlantic. You'd expect a lot more precipitation here than this is suggesting. So definitely GFS looking at one possible scenario in the longer term. The GM, the ECWF keeping us generally settled and under high pressure throughout the next 10 days. There will be precipitation around at times, especially further northwards. And then the Ensemble members are just showing that there is quite a bit of uncertainty in the longer range. No real favoured scenario yet, but at least the next week to 10 days is going to remain fairly settled, probably relatively chilly as well. So anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you stay safe out there. It's going to be foggy, frosty and icy. So again, do take care out there and keep an eye on the weather warnings. One good thing coming from this, yes, it's cold, but it is really quite dry out there for many. So I hope a lot of you are enjoying that after the very unsettled end to December and start of January we have had, where we saw a lot of flood warnings and a lot of actual flooding in places. Hopefully, though, this colder and drier spell does allow those river levels and saturation levels to subside. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.